Hey folks, I'm Bradford Becker. Welcome to Red Barn Radio. Now in our 24th year of broadcasting, tonight we present Roots Music Southern Style, episode number 939. Woohoo! Oh! And our guest this evening is guitarist Joseph Allred. Joseph traveled about 3 hours from Crawford, Tennessee, where he lives, to share his music and his thoughts with us here on Red Barn Radio. Joseph started playing guitar as a young person. In his adulthood, he attended Boston University for several years to study religion and philosophy. Then he returned to the place where he grew up to explore where he wanted to go with music. Joseph composes and plays his music mostly on guitar, but I'd hunch he's got an extensive arsenal of instruments in his house. And I think Joseph probably plays them all. We welcome Joseph Allred to Red Barn Radio. Hey, Joseph.
Oh, thank you. This first song's called Dance of the Fair Folk. And I wrote this, it started as a memory of chasing fireflies in my grandparents' yard when I was a kid. And I kind of turned that into some fantasia that's become a wedding song. Kind of, even though I joke about cursing weddings by playing at them, because people keep getting divorced when I play at their wedding. And I have another wedding song too that I'll play here in a minute. But this is Dance of the Fair Folk.
Good evening and welcome to Red Barn Radio. Wherever in the world you're listening, welcome to Roots Music Southern Style. Thanks to WEKU, Red Barn Radio's official radio partner, NPR for Central and Eastern Kentucky. Listen online at weku.org. Red Barn Radio is supported by Visit Lex, Lexington, Kentucky's Convention and Visitors Bureau. More information on what Lexington has to offer is at visitlex.com. LexArts, Lexington, Kentucky's premier cultural development, advocacy, and fundraising organization, working for the development of a strong and vibrant arts community as a means of enhancing the quality of life in Central Kentucky. Follow Red Barn Radio on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Here's the host of Red Barn Radio to tell us more about tonight's performers.
Much of Joseph Allred's music is rooted in a style of guitar playing that guitarist John Fahey labeled American primitive. We'll talk about that tonight some. The term is not meant to suggest simplicity, rather it describes music driven more by personal exploration and intuition and experimentation than by adherence to formal music conventions. That said, Joseph is well-versed in a wide range of musical traditions, from blues and ragtime to folk and classical music, even I know he's got probably some history in rock as well. His playing reflects not only a spirit of discovery, but also a really deep understanding of the many musical languages from which he draws. So glad to have Joseph Allred with us here on Red Barn Radio.
This song's called The Groundhog, and I wrote this about a family of groundhogs that decided to take up residence underneath my house, and I thought they needed a theme song. So I wrote this for them, and I think you might be able to hear a little bit of the way they kind of tumble when they run. I think they're kind of funny. They can run pretty fast. They're not the most elegant looking when they do it, but they can move real fast. So whatever. I think that's kind of a noble creature, which is why I wrote the song. Thank you. I have another song that is named or kind of woodland creature themed. This song's called Lucy's Lord Protector. And I wrote this for a friend of mine who kept having encounters with a rabbit. She kept seeing the same rabbit and thinking that it was trying to communicate something to her that she never really did figure out, and it just disappeared. And it may have just been a rabbit, but it may have been some kind of emissary or something in between. I don't really know, but I thought it was fun to think about. Oh, and this is called Lucy's Lord Protector. I can't remember whether I even said that.
All right, our guest this evening on Red Barn Radio was Joseph Allred. I met Joseph, I don't know, maybe a year ago. I think when you were in town for the old time convention. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was a fiddlers convention or just an old time gathering, I think is what they called it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's when we met, and I heard you, and I just was just so intrigued. And as I told you, I've been a fan of this kind of music, or a lot of the kind of music you play for a long time, and so it's great to have you here, and good to finally get a chance to visit with you. Yeah, so welcome. So let's see, where do we begin? First of all, I guess maybe talk about woodchucks. I'm not a fan of the woodchuck. I came out of my house the other morning to pick my last two beautiful heads of romaine lettuce. Oh. And I came out the garden, and they were like cleared off. And I know who did it. I know who did it. I haven't given him a name, but it starts with a W and ends with a K. But anyway, yeah. If I'll ever love a woodchuck, I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. Possums, I feel the same way about them. But it was a beautiful song. I like the song. I'll keep listening to the song and see if it makes me change my feelings about woodchucks. When you recorded that song, you did it with drums.
Oh, yeah, there's quite a bit of instrumentation in it.
Yeah, and I hear all that instrumentation just with you doing it on the guitar. I hear all that without the drums, really.
So I try often to avoid. I don't know. I think you can kind of trap yourself. Like if you're playing guitar, or I hear things sometimes other than just a guitar when I'm playing, and there's a temptation maybe to go and add those things. And I really did that on that song and on the other songs on that album. But now I don't know. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have. I think sometimes it's better not to hit somebody over the head. If you can suggest or kind of evoke something without literally doing it, I think maybe that's a little better.
Yeah, at the same time, I remember, when I heard some of my first Leo Kottke things where he brought some drums and a bass in, I thought, it's kind of funky. It's kind of fun. So I don't know. I wouldn't second guess your choice. I can totally see that woodchuck lumbering across the yard to my romaine lettuce as you play that song. Tell me more about the place you live down in. Is it? We were talking earlier. What's the name of the county?
It's in Overton County.
Overton County. Is Crawford? Was that correct?
Yeah, Crawford's our mailing address.
Okay.
But there's a bunch of just kind of informal names for different communities that used to have their own zip codes and post offices, but don't now. So they've been kind of merged in. So Crawford's the closest post office, but I really live in a different community, like down in the holler, and Crawford's up on the mountain. Oh,
okay. And your family has a lot of history there. Could you talk a little bit about your family history in that area?
Yeah, on my dad's side of the family, my great grandparents came there from North Carolina, maybe around probably the early 1800s. I'd say probably not long after Tennessee was officially granted statehood. I think there was a movement of people, and it was settled later than a lot of parts of the Appalachian Mountains, where it's kind of on the edge of the Cumberland Plateau. So kind of the western edge of the Appalachian Mountains. Yeah, it's really pretty and it's not very developed, and I kind of hope it stays that way. We've had a little bit of encroachment of people moving in there and thinking that they are going to be somewhere they never have to look at another person again. And then it turns out that they do have neighbors, and then the other neighbor had the same idea that they were going to move to some pristine wilderness, and they start fighting each other. Most of the people who have been there for a long time are not like that. It's people who think that they're going to move into some pristine, Appalachian wilderness, and get away from the world, and then the world is there, and they're kind of upset about it.
When you decided, so you grew up there. When you decided to go to Boston, was that after high school, I guess?
Yeah, I had already been in college for a while. I grew up in a little town right over the mountain from there, but I spent a lot of time out on the farm visiting my grandparents. My brother and I grew up in a little town, and then after I graduated high school, my parents moved back out to the farm where my dad grew up. Okay. So I've been settled down for maybe 15 years or so out there. So I went from just visiting my grandparents and playing around in the river and all of that stuff to kind of, after my grandparents died, we started spending more time out there. My dad, I think, really wanted to convey how important it was to us.
Yeah.
That place was. Yeah, but then I moved to Boston in 2016. So it was after I'd already gotten a couple of college. I have 2 degrees from the University of Tennessee.
What'd you study?
Philosophy. The first degree was in philosophy, and the second one was religious studies with a psychology minor.
Was that was that in Boston or in Tennessee?
That was in Tennessee. And then I
Yeah.
went to Boston to kind of expand upon that, but I ended up not finishing my degree program there.
Yeah. Did you have in mind education as a pursuit, or
Yeah, I thought I might have a career in academia, but I'm not very well suited for it, and I just wasn't doing very well. I wasn't happy at all doing it. I needed to kind of be back home. And also, the period that I lived in Boston was from 2016 to 2022.
Oh,
And that's, Trump's first presidency and all the kind of social unrest that went with that happened. And then
Oh,
COVID
yeah.
happened while I was up there. And it was just kind of it's the first time I'd ever lived outside of Tennessee, and a whole lot of kind of stuff that made me rethink what I was doing there happened.
wow. Yeah, that sounds tumultuous.
Yeah.
It was for everybody, no matter where you lived, but
Yeah.
but especially in the big cities, right? And then at that point in time, Joseph. So that's 2016. So you were already playing music at that point, but because you've been playing even as a young person. Had you at that point already in 2016 sort of adopted some rendering or some version of what you do now? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been doing that for a few years. I really got into it. I think 2011 is when I played my first solo show, and that coincided. I had just a lot of kind of personal demons I was struggling with, and one of the ways I got back on my feet from that was to get into this much more self-contained kind of music.
Yeah.
But then right as I was getting back on my feet, my dad got diagnosed with cancer and died a few months after that.
Oh,
so
wow.
I started getting into this stuff in 2011, and then in May of 2012 is when my dad died. So going through all of that, like this kind of music that's much more personal and kind of place-based, I think that was a way of really thinking about my whole family heritage and trying to understand myself in light of all that better. And especially since, losing my dad was, that's one of the things I'm sure for anybody who's lost a parent, that's like something that really changes your perspective on the world.
It sure does. Yeah, world's a different place, I know. I remember feeling that way when my dad passed. Mm-hmm. So I woke up the next morning. It's like, well, it's a whole different world. Mm-hmm. Different country or something. It's weird. Back to that sort of idea of American primitive. I wonder if maybe we ought to just front load the program by having you say at least something about what that means to you, and then maybe more specifically, if we don't want to necessarily pin you down to being a part of a particular genre, if you want to just talk a little bit about what kinds of things you'd like for people to listen for as you play your next set of music.
American primitive, that's been kind of a fraught conversation in the last few years. Obviously, the word primitive has a lot of derogatory and like racist, there's a lot of often like really overtly racist connotations.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, that's not really the context it was used in with this music. Like that's not at all how John Fahey related to that label. And he didn't come up with that, by the way. It had been around since at least the early 1940s is when people started to talk about a tradition of painting as first how American primitive.
Right.
It was understood to mean just stuff made by people who weren't formally trained, who were kind of working outside of the art schools and, conventions that you would learn if you actually had formal training in painting or sculpture, whatever. And it was maybe Eugene Denson who worked with John at Tacoma Records. He said he might have been the first person to actually suggest that for John's music. John had kind of my attitude. I kind of liked his attitude towards it. He said, when he was asked about it in an interview, he said, I didn't come up with that label. And the person said, well, do you think that there's any label that fits very well? And he said, if by primitive you mean self-taught, like Henri Rousseau was a person he mentioned, the French self-taught primitive or naive painter who was kind of ridiculed by the artistic establishment, so it was always a little bit of a derogatory thing. But John related to Henri Rousseau. Henri Rousseau was completely self-taught. He was ridiculed a little bit by the artistic establishment, and John was a completely self-taught guitar player, and I think had a lot of appreciation for just everyday kind of people. I think that's what makes up a lot of the world, and his music is just a pretty mundane, with a little bit of like a kind of fantastic element to it, but a lot of the time it's just kind of everyday kind of people. But what he said is, that label, if you mean self-taught, and that's about as close as you can get, but I wouldn't worry about calling it anything, were his exact words about it. And he definitely wanted to not be lumped in too much into the folk boom that was happening, and that was out of an understanding that even if he was playing the same music, it's different if you're from the suburbs of Washington, D.C., compared to, Roscoe Holcomb or Gene Ritchie or Morgan Sexton from Eastern Kentucky, or John Hurt or Skip James from rural Mississippi, or something like the people who really belong to these more local kind of tradition-based cultures. And I think that part of the reason that he accepted the label American Primitive at all was to kind of distance himself a little bit. And I really respect that about him. I've had a problem with people not really understanding, like when they engage with the anthology of American folk music or something, Harry Smith's like really, really influential compilation of stuff. When I engage with that, I hear, I hear my own culture a little bit just a couple generations ago, but so much of that has been damaged or lost, so it's a little bit sad to see yourself reflected in that way. And I think somebody like John Fahey didn't see himself reflected in it in the same way that, again, somebody from Appalachia or the Ozarks or the Delta or Piedmont or wherever these kinds of blues music came from. But I respect that about John, and people have tried to point to his use of the phrase American Primitive to mean that he must have had a derogatory view towards people, that influenced him, and I just don't see that at all. I think he had a much more humanizing way of engaging with a lot of the music that influenced him than Pete Seeger did. I think he could be kind of patronizing. I like Pete Seeger in a lot of ways. He seems like he seems like he was a pretty principled, good person. I don't want to, just kind of go after him, but he was a little, like he'd have people on a show and he'd be sitting there. The way he engaged with them is almost like if you asked a child to do a recital for you. There's just something a little bit weird about it. But again, when you see yourself much more reflected on the side of Roscoe Holcomb or somebody, and not on the side of Pete Seeger as much. So all that is to say, I kind of fit into that tradition of guitar playing, and especially since John was one of the first people to really deeply consider the guitar, the steel string guitar, which is a very recent, very American development that happened to the instrument, to really consider it for its own sake and not as an accompaniment, not as something to just play like a standard repertoire parlor guitar tunes or something, but to really develop original compositions and kind of put it forward as a concert instrument. And I think that's really significant. I don't know that enough people really understand how significant that is. We kind of take it for granted now, but it's still maybe a little off in the world of experimental music or avant-garde, like the Sonic Youth and Jim O'Rourke and the people who kind of picked up on John Fahey's work and kind of put it more in the avant-garde space. But there's something more profound about what John was doing that I don't know has really been understood. I think Robbie Basho maybe had that vision more than John did, who also had records on Tacoma. When he mentioned wanting to bring the guitar onto the world stage as almost a kind of American ethnic music in the same way that the people consider other cultures, like Eastern cultures or something, to be ethnic or whatever, then Robbie Basho thought, well, is there not some deeper kind of American spirit, like ethnic spirit or something, and does this instrument maybe represent like the development of that kind of music developing in America? So I like all that, and I definitely share some of the goals of that tradition. I don't like to get too hung up on labels or working within a tradition to the point where I'm like kind of forcing myself to stay in some parameters, but I find it to be really to be inspiring to work with tradition and to acknowledge that some people who came before I did, had some really good ideas I still think need to be worked with.
Tell listeners who some of the other folks are who sort of fall into this realm. You know, you mentioned Basho and Fahey, and then Jack Rose, others that listeners might, follow up on to learn more about the idiom.
Yeah, there are a few people who are doing music kind of in this vein, sometimes kind of in the vein, sometimes like very much in the vein of this tradition. They're doing it now. Like my friend Glenn Jones, who made this little stool that I've got my foot on. Glenn made that for me. He was in Cul-de-sac. They did a collaboration with John Fahey back in 95 or 6. It's called The Epiphany of Glenn Jones. And the liner notes are hilarious. John was not, we were talking earlier, you mentioned he was kind of mean and ornery at that point, and Glenn's engagement, what he came to realize is John almost resented him for idolizing him. John almost resented Glenn, I think, for kind of idolizing John a little bit too much, and instead of just saying, hey, that's a little weird, he just like manipulated him a little, or like kind of just was a pain until Glenn kind of realized what he was doing. But Glenn is still making he makes solo guitar music now, and that's really, really good. And he's on tour with Liam Grant, is a younger person that I met a few years ago. He lives in Boston. And actually, we met right as I was moving away from Boston, and Liam was moving back from Boston. Liam went to college in Boone, North Carolina. So he kind of got in with some old time people in Boone that influenced him a whole lot. Let's see what else. There's James Blackshaw's an English guitar player that started like maybe around the same time Jack Rose got like that wave, maybe 25 years ago or so. But James is mostly focused on a 12-string, and I heard his music like about 20 years ago when I was first starting to get into this stuff, and it really, I think, inspired me it drew me to the 12-string a little bit more. And there's this technique I do a lot, this little flourishing thing with my right hand. It's a kind of tremolo. It's a little bit of a classical guitar move. I don't do it exactly the way James does it, but I think the reason I was really fixated on learning how to do that, I think it came a lot from listening to some of James Blackshaw's music. Let's see who else is out there. Marisa Anderson is one of the people that's like kind of in the vein of this music. I think she would say she's definitely influenced by it, but is trying to to expand out a little bit. And she had a recent.
Yes. She's done some electric. She's also done some neat stuff on electric, which I think is cool as anything.
I like Marisa's stuff a lot, and she's just had a recent album where she's been engaging with some of Harry Smith's work that I was talking about.
Ah, cool.
But it's his work. He had a bunch of, like a collection of a lot of records of non-Western music, especially like Middle Eastern stuff, and what Marisa's trying to focus on is music from countries the United States has bombed or been in conflicts with, and Marisa's trying to kind of draw music out from some of those cultures.
Oh, wow, that's neat. Well, let's get back to talking some more about this in a little while. I think we ought to get you playing some more songs.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've been talking.
No, I've been just enjoying it as much as anybody. I know listeners are too. Yeah, let's play some more music, and then we'll come back and talk in a bit. Welcome back, Joseph Allred.
Try to do a quick retune here. There's no painless way to do this. This next song's called Cage Cove Suite. It's named for a state park in the Smoky Mountains, so kind of close to Knoxville in Tennessee. And I had a couple friends who got married there. This is the other wedding song that I wrote this, or started coming up with at the morning of their wedding, and they got divorced, and then I played it at somebody else's wedding, and they got divorced, and it made me sad, and that's what I was mentioning earlier. I shouldn't make light of that, and it's sad, but never mind, it happens. Maybe it's not sad. Sometimes it's good to just be honest that things aren't working out and not try to stick around in an unhealthy relationship. But anyway, this is supposed to be a joyful wedding song, and now I've just kind of crashed it before I even started. But you can pretend. Wait a second. There we go. thunderous applause from the crowd here. This next song is called The Emerald City, and it is in the same tuning, so I don't have to retune this ancient guitar, and that's always good. And this song is named after the introduction of a book by Henri Corbin that I read. He was a French. He wrote on a lot of topics, mostly Islam, and a lot on Iran, like kind of pre-Islamic Iran and Islamic Iran, but he also wrote on Ibn Arabi. He was an Andalusian kind of visionary theologian. He's a really interesting character. But the Emerald City describes a vision of a heavenly realm that some people have claimed to have and have described with quite a bit of detail, actually. I thought that was interesting. I don't know what kind of psychological mechanisms or spiritual mechanisms might be at play, if any. But I thought there was something kind of green and shining or something about this melody. Probably is a better way to describe. I always feel stupid trying to describe the way a sound sounds. That's kind of the reason I play guitar instead of writing lyrics or other things. But maybe just describing it as a color, it makes more sense than otherwise. But anyway, this is Emerald City.
I'd like to take a moment before we get on with more music to remind listeners that Red Barn live streams, both tonight's and on any Wednesday, remain available online for you to view and listen to at your convenience, along with live audio streams, compliments of WGAD.net in Central New York. Don't miss a single episode of our program. Check out all of our content on the Red Barn Radio YouTube channel. I want to tell you about the merch store. We've been talking about that a lot lately. The merch radio store, the Red Barn Radio merch store is open. Been talking about it so much I can't really say it again. Show your support for our program by buying something. You can get some RBR swag there. Look for a direct link on the Red Barn Radio main page, our Facebook page, and on our weekly newsletter. I was holding up this lovely Red Barn Radio mug. John in down there in North Carolina, Vern in Nyack, you're watching. How about if you buy one of these? That'd be nice. You'd love to have one. I'd even sign it for you. Next week, Birmingham, Alabama's Taylor Hollingsworth is our guest. Taylor coined the phrase folk and roll to describe the sound that he makes. He's proudly claiming that sound with his latest album, aptly titled, what do you think it's called? Yeah, Folk and Roll. Fans of J.J. Cale, Mississippi John Hurt, Chuck Berry, Richard Thompson, Jonathan Richman, John Prine, those are all people we like, will find much delight in Hollingsworth's blend of timeless influences. For much of the early aughts, Hollingsworth toured extensively with his punk-tinged rock band. Think Ramones meet Chuck Berry meets ZZ Top, and he worked as a hired gun playing guitar with various artists on the road, most notably Conor Oberst and the Mystic Valley Band. His performances are a sight to behold. Finger-picked electric guitar, mic'd-up foot stomp box, providing the rhythmic backbone, and occasionally the addition of a looper pedal to layer in guitar solos. Does that sound good to you? Well, good. Join us next week on Red Barn Radio. We are going to get back to some more music now with Joseph Allred.
This one's called Ditch Lily Sweet. I feel like for some reason my voice always gets louder when I pronounce that. I don't know why. I feel like I just said it weird for some reason, but maybe I did. Anyway, ditch lilies are non-native and invasive, and I didn't know that when I named this song. I just thought they were these little resilient orange flowers. And I thought I'm going to write a song about these resilient orange flowers, and then they turned out to be non-native and invasive. So this is a song about how you shouldn't be presumptuous or jump the gun when you name your songs. I think that's what it's ended up being about. Why, thank you. Here we are. That high E string always makes me nervous. All right, this is called Swananoa. It's named for the river in the little town in North Carolina, which I thought was a pretty word. I think it may be, the meaning of it may be lost to history, but I still like the way it sounds.
Joseph, what tuning was that you just...
This is C, G, C, G, C, C.
Okay.
And I don't know what, that's a very neutral. It's a lot of ones and fives, if anybody knows scale degrees. It's just a really neutral kind of modal tuning.
Yeah, and do you use a lot of different tunings?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah?
A lot of them are based on, let's see, I have a lot of variations on open C, where you have C, G, C, G, C, E, and then you can tune the E string to different things and end up with a bunch of different. So I had 2 pieces in open C, and now I have this one. And there are some other ones I use occasionally. I don't think I'm going to use any other C-type tunings. That was something Robbie Basho did quite a bit. And there was a German guitar player named Stefan Basho Jungans. I don't know if you're familiar with his.
I'm not.
He was a fantastic guitar player that was really in his own, kind of in his own world. This stuff had like really impacted me. It was also I mentioned trying to say that a particular melody had a color, but Stefan was a painter. He did a lot of abstract and like kind of watercolor landscape paintings, and you can really get I kind of think the relationship between his paintings and his music. He was East German and heard a Windham Hill compilation and heard Robbie Basho's music, and then he affixed that name. It was Stefan Jungans, and then he was Stefan Basho Jungans after he heard that. But Stefan maintained, he passed away a few years ago, but a website with a whole lot of the tunings that Robbie Basho used. And I stumbled onto that like 20 years ago when I first started getting interested in this kind of playing. I somehow found my way to Stefan's website, which is still there, and there's a lot of it's a real good resource for different kinds of tunings and things.
I never thought of Windham Hill. I haven't thought of Windham Hill for a long time. That was when I think of the guitar players on there, I think of Michael Hedges and Alex DeGrassi, and then of course George Winston, who was sort of like the kingpin of the Windham Hill world, I guess. But Robbie Basho actually recorded with Windham Hill?
Yeah, there were 2 records that were not kept in print when William Ackerman, who started that label,
Ackerman, right.
sold the label to I think a Sony subsidiary or like a major label subsidiary, and
Sure.
they didn't keep Robbie's records in print because they didn't sell as well as some of the other ones. They've been reissued since then. There's Visions of the Country was on Windham Hill originally, and the Art of Solo Acoustic or Steel Stringed Acoustic Guitar 6 and 12 or whatever that long unwieldy title. Those 2 albums were on Windham Hill and have been reissued. But somehow, and what Stefan said is all the friends he knew, they had to kind of smuggle Western music into East Germany when the Berlin Wall was still up. But he said a lot of his friends really liked the Michael Hedges and Alex DeGrassi and George Winston stuff, but something about, there was like a Robbie Basho song on there, and Stefan was just transfixed by it.
How neat. Can you talk some about the 2 instruments you brought with you tonight? I'd love to. Yeah, you can start with the one you've got on your lap there.
Yeah, this is, I made this at the Troublesome Creek factory. We talked about that a minute ago down in Hindman, Kentucky, and it's got this real pretty, if I can see this walnut back.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And sides. It's Eastern, a black walnut. Oh, I need to quit hitting that microphone. I'm sorry.
Tell people about the Troublesome Creek factory.
They build really fantastic instruments, guitars and wood-top banjos, and they're part of like the a dulcimer heritage project. They build a lot of dulcimers too, but it's also like a drug and alcohol recovery program, which is, I think, a really important thing to do. People who are in, addiction recovery, to be able to have a steady, meaningful employment. I think something about actually having materials and working with your hands, and now you've got something done. There's probably something very therapeutic about that. And I mentioned earlier when I started getting into this music that I had struggled with a lot of personal demons. I was like kind of way down in the depths of alcohol abuse for years. Almost lost my life to that.
Oh, wow.
And finding this kind of guitar music at least really helped me. And I had family members who didn't give up on me, but it's easy to think that people who are, homeless or, that they just deserve whatever kind of harm befalls them, and it's not as easy to give people a second chance like that. So I think it's a really good thing that they employ people as part of that addiction recovery program, and manage to make just absolutely fantastic instruments too.
And so how did that program? So did you go down there as someone in recovery? Did you go down there as someone who was curious to learn more about instrument making?
I went
mission?
down there for the latter. I've been on the other side of recovery for a good while, or at least like stable enough to not need any kind of acute help.
Yeah, gotcha. And so the program though did you say it's a 2-week program? Mm-hmm. And during that 2-week period, can you be, can one of us in here contact them and say, hey, we'd really be interested in being part of that 2-week program, and if you can pay the money, can you do it, or are they selective?
If they were selective, I don't know why they would have let me in there. I didn't have any woodworking experience and thought I was going to fail, and I ended up with, this is a fantastic guitar. You can also build a dulcimer or mandolin or something if you want to do that.
Well, the difference between me and you making a guitar there is I'd make a guitar and play it in my living room and nobody'd see it, and you take yours out on the road and tell people about the program.
Oh, I'm very glad to get to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty neat. What about your 12-string?
Oh, it's
Can you tell us about that
really-
one? You called it an ancient instrument. You didn't use the word primitive.
This is, by the standards of a lot of instruments, like people who play fiddle or something will have like a early 1800s or like 18th century
Yes.
fiddle or something. Guitars, this is a very modern instrument in the grand scheme of things. So an ancient guitar is like 90 or 100 years old, which is what this one is. For a guitar that's, especially a 12-string guitar, it goes all the way back to the kind of earliest period of people making those. This was made by Karl Holzapfel, which I think is crabapple. It's a German word. Holz is like a forest, a wooded area, and Apfel is apple. That's where the English word. We have a common root there. So Karl Crabapple, or Holzapfel, came to Baltimore like sometime around the turn of the 20th century and set his shop up, and was well known for making. John Fahey had a Karl Holzapfel 12-string on the piece America. John barely played 12-string at all, but when he did, he had a guitar very similar to this one. And I didn't know that when I got this. I just saw an auction for it, and something really grabbed my attention about it. And it was while I was moving to Boston. So this was I've had this for about 10 years now. And I just went out of the way a little bit on one of my trips from Tennessee to Boston and went to the shop where this was. And I remember as soon as I held it, it's very, very lightweight. It's like earlier guitars are built quite a bit lighter, and a 12-string is not designed to be tuned up to standard tuning either. So you either need to have really, really light strings on it or like regular strings and use a lot of down-tuned things, which is what I do. Huh. But it has such a unique sound. This is kind of the blues era. If you've heard Willie McTell or Leadbelly or Barbecue Bob, some of those guys who played 12-string guitars, they would have been playing something like this too. It's very different than a modern, heavier kind of instrument.
Yeah. Well, so when we talk about trying to define what it is that this music encompasses. When I hear normal fingerstyle players, I just listen to the word. I normal fingerstyle. I don't know what a normal fingerstyle player is. When I hear traditional fingerstyle players, what I hear is kind of a common language. Like they're all sort of drawn from the common language. Like, oh yeah, I kind of recognize that's sort of a Hurt phrase, or that's kind of a James, or that sounds sort of like Renborn, or it sounds whatever. But in your music, it seems harder to nail down, like, ooh, what is that language? And do you feel like when you're creating the kind of music that you create, that you are, I don't know, developing a unique language that is Joseph?
I don't know. I try not to think too much about what I'm doing. Is where it comes from. I don't like leaning too much into blues, just out of respect for how unique a cultural situation blues music really came from. And obviously I do lean into it a ton. It's so woven into all the fabric of American music, any kind of country or southern rock or blues-based kind of rock music. So when I learned to play guitar, I absorbed a whole lot of that anyway. So I don't know. I try to just not think too much and just kind of let whatever happens happen. A lot. I think I'm, especially with the 12-string stuff. A lot of that comes from like piano and harp music. I like kind of romantic era, or some of the impressionists like Claude Debussy piano stuff where it's all these washes of sound. Or Alice Coltrane, the way she improvised on a harp. A lot of what I do with my right hand, like I'm going to do an improvised piece here in a minute, and you'll probably notice I'm kind of keeping the strings going a whole lot, and that's what Alice Coltrane would do on the harp, is just move kind of constantly through the strings. So some of it comes, I think, from listening to not instruments that aren't guitars. Some of it comes from just trying not to think too much about anything. And then maybe you end up with something more personal doing that, or it comes from trying to emulate I spend a whole lot of time outside. There's a creek right behind my house. It empties out into it's the West Fork of the Obi River. And I spend a whole lot of time down by the creek, and I go swimming. There's a swimming hole almost in my backyard. So I'm around running water a lot, and just wind and like leaves and flowers and all kinds of stuff, I think maybe, and birds. Sometimes I'm trying to emulate either the sound or just the feeling of being a very like humid, green kind of place. So I don't know, maybe that. That's
you draw so much from your environment to create the sounds that you create in your music. Does that ever kind of make you curious to explore new environments to see what would come out, and how you would interpret those other kinds of sounds and sensory things?
Yeah, I've noticed how, like when I lived in Boston and I was in this kind of cramped little studio apartment there, it seems like what I was doing was very different. It tended to be more cerebral, like I was thinking more about what I was doing, using weird like tonalities, like a whole tone scale, and listening to Derek Bailey and some like real out there free improv kind of things. So I think that had something to do with the environment I was in, not being as conducive to the same kind of inspiration, at least, that I'm used to being out in the country. And I've also been in some places that I lived in. The old house my great-grandparents built for several years. I just recently moved into a new house that we had built. But living in that old house can be very, very heavy. I feel like the whole time I've lived there and all the other people who've lived there, and it can be a little, I don't know, when you really open yourself up in that kind of environment, it can be kind of overwhelming, or to me it is. I don't want to talk about like spirits and things out there, but I can just feel something of the history of that place. And just all of the people and all of the energy and stories of people. It can be a little overwhelming. But being outside, like just really being around this stuff that's so, I don't know, it's refreshingly indifferent. Like the Appalachian Mountains are millions and millions of years old, older than fossils even. And it used to be there was a supercontinent in the Appalachian Mountains. Part of the same mountain range is in northwestern Africa, the Atlas Mountains. Some of it's in the Scottish Highlands, some of it's in Norway. So the mountains that I'm around and all the caves and stuff are just so old. It's refreshingly like inhuman. It makes me look around at all the stuff humanity's doing and think about how completely absurd it is that people spend their lives doing some of the things like trying to gain political control or military control or something. And it's nice to be around something that's just so much older and deeper than all of that. And being outside in some of the environment, it really helps for that. I don't know if it would feel different. I haven't ever really tried to go to another like continent or something and sit down and really see how that affects me. But it might affect me in some way.
And do you, what about in terms of your music listening? Is that something you do a lot? Do you explore new music that's out there, or does that become overwhelming too?
It's hard to turn off like the critical approach that I have, and it's hard for me to just sit and listen to music without like breaking it apart and thinking, oh, would I do that or that or that? And I really don't like doing that, and it makes me not enjoy listening to music as much as I used to. But what I've been doing recently, and it's been really beneficial, is I've inherited a bunch of records that were my parents and a bunch of my brother's records. He moved out of a house and didn't want his record collection and was thinking about just giving them to somebody or selling them for real cheap, but I ended up just taking them, and I alphabetized them, and they're all like on a shelf, and I've just been going from I'm only to, this has been going on a few weeks, and I'm in the C's right now, but I've just been going through listening to every record, even if it's one that I think I'll hate, even if it's my parents, like adult contemporary, like George Benson or some kind of easy jazz or something they've got in there. But I've really enjoyed doing that. It's nice to like just say, I'm not going to skip any of these. I'm going to go through, I'm going to listen to every one of these records and see what's in here. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple months, and I've really enjoyed it. And I found some stuff I probably wouldn't have listened to otherwise that I've really kind of liked.
Do you feel like it did that experience? Because I've had some similar experiences. Do you feel like that experience kind of put you back in touch with your dad? You know, hearing some of the music that gave him a lot of joy.
Yeah, I grew up listening to some of the. There's some really good records in there, like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. I remember the first time I was a little kid hearing Led Zeppelin. My dad played that for me and my brother, and it scared me to death. It felt weird, and there was a world with magic and goblins and whatever else, and some weird occult stuff, whatever Jimmy Page was into. I kind of felt all of that, I think. But it does. It's nice to have the actual record, the physical thing there that has been, and that I have that kind of connection to. And I've still got the turntable and the receiver. Bit the dust a long time ago, but I've still got the same speakers that were my parents, and they've got cat scratches from like 40 years ago on there. So it is kind of nice to maintain some kind of continuity. There are a lot of things in the world right now that really try to prevent us from feeling that, I think. Like everything's so uprooted, you're supposed to just use things and throw them away.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice having something to oppose that a little bit.
Well, it's been really nice being with you.
Oh, thank you.
I've had such a nice time talking with you, and your music is beautiful. And can we hear some more?
Oh, sure.
All right, let's get back, Joseph Allred. I loved Ditch Lily Sweet, by the way. Just loved it.
That's a good one. It took me a while to write that because it's long and it's complicated and kind of sparse. So that one took me a little bit.
There's a lot of space in there, and I was sort of trying to pick out, what moments in the song said. There were a lot of moments that were very peaceful and calm and sort of pastoral, and then there was sort of moments of invasive and ditch that came across in some of the dissonance. I loved it. It was really neat.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right. What you going to play next?
This is called Before the Lord. And
What's
I
it
will
about?
walk before the Lord in the land of the living. I don't know how many times I've introduced this song and said I don't remember which. That's a psalm from the Bible. It's one of the psalms, and I don't remember which one it is. And I've been playing this song for years and can't remember which psalm it is.
We can Google it, of course.
I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living. It's engraved on the tombstone of the old cemetery where my dad's buried. And I wrote this as starts out like maybe kind of in the cemetery as a little bit of a funeral dirge. Then it's a little bit of a going back into the world, I guess, carrying whatever you can from people that you've lost and carrying that back out in the world and walking before the Lord in the land of the living. And because by the time you're dead, you can't do it anymore. So it's good to remember that. It's maybe a little bit goth or spooky or something. I like cemeteries a lot. That old cemetery, which I'm going to return to for Cub Creek Blues Part 2 here in a minute. It's a real peaceful place. I very much understand why my dad wanted to be buried there, and it's good to think about that kind of thing occasionally. But anyway, this isn't as depressing as that may have sounded. This is an improvised piece. And I'll see where it takes us here. I usually like to do this. I played in a Middle Eastern music ensemble a little bit while I lived in Boston and learned how to play oud and got to sit in with a bunch of people from, I mentioned earlier, countries the United States has been involved in bombing campaigns against. People from Yemen and Syria and Lebanon and Palestine, and all these people have shared something very personal and very important about their own cultures with me. And now some of them, their homes have been bombed, their families have been bombed since then. And I hate that, but that mode right there has been used in a whole bunch of different contexts. There's some traditional Jewish music that uses that. There's some Romani music. It's called the Phrygian dominant mode in Western music. It's Maqam Hijaz and Arabic music. So I hope this, I don't know what this is going to do. I don't think playing guitar amounts to all that much in the grand scheme of things, but I at least wish that the world were a little more peaceful and not causing as much unnecessary suffering as it is.
Joseph Allred. There are many people to thank for our broadcast. First, Joseph, our guest on this program. We want to thank all of you for listening to our webcast, watching us on social media, and those listening to us on our growing network of Red Barn stations and media worldwide. Thanks to WEKU, Red Barn's premier radio partner, Central and Eastern Kentucky radio news leader. You can listen online at weku.org. It's your chance to hear more great live music from Red Barn Radio and WEKU. That's NPR for Central and Eastern Kentucky. Those of you here in the Central Kentucky area, you got to be sure to check out Red Barn TV. It's our weekly program of music now on ABC 36, WTVQ, and the Red Barn Radio YouTube channel is also a place you can go to watch thousands of other videos that we've made over our last 24 seasons of broadcasting. Red Barn Radio comes to you from our home, the Lex Arts Performance Hall in downtown Lexington, Kentucky. Our website has updates and further information on our guests and our future programs. We're on the web at redbarnradio.com. Hey, remember, check out that merch link. And John, I'll let you know how much those coffee cups cost. Before we close out the program, let's bring back Joseph Allred.
This is Cub Creek Blues Part 2. I had a Part 1 that I forgot how to play. And Cub Creek Blues is something my dad said, and he was wondering whether he would get to see his home again when he had cancer and was in the hospital for the first time. And thankfully he did. I'm very glad that he got out and had another few months. But the Cub Creek is the creek that runs back behind my house I mentioned earlier, and going on the other side of it feels a little like going into a different world. It's almost, I have an album called Mandorla Valley, and I was interested in the mandorlas, like where a circle overlaps, almond shape kind of that a Venn diagram makes. And it's used symbolically in a lot of artwork to represent a meeting place or a kind of overlapping of worlds, like the world of the living and dead or the past and the present or something. And I feel maybe a little like going across that creek, you're kind of going into a place where, I don't know, things are different or not. I think maybe I took too much drugs at some point in my life, and that's why I'm thinking about that. I don't condone that. But anyway, this is something I wrote, kind of recontextualizing the melody from the first Cub Creek Blues. And it's a memory of my dad, like a lot of things are. And it's a pretty peaceful piece, and then I'll leave everybody alone and let you go back to doom scrolling on social media or doing whatever you're doing. And thank you a lot to Bradford here and everybody for putting this show on, and I really appreciate it. I like Lexington a lot. I've had played here quite a few times for many years, and I live really close to Kentucky and kind of feel I like Kentucky. I think we have some sports rivalry that I don't know or care that much about. Maybe I'm not supposed to like Kentucky, according to Tennessee Vols football fans who have the most obnoxious colors you can imagine. Living in Knoxville for years, that obnoxious sea of orange. All right, I'm going to quit talking and play this song. But anyway.
Well, that's all for our show for this week. Remember, you can see and hear Red Barn Radio worldwide as we stream live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern in North America. It's always great to hear from all of you who listen to Red Barn Radio's archive performances on your favorite streaming platforms. Speaking of you listeners, folks, before, during, or after you enjoy Red Barn Radio, take just a moment to engage with us, won't you? Your comments, your sharing, certainly your choice to subscribe to our newsletter matters so much to us and keep us growing and continuing our mission to bring roots music Southern style to your neck of the woods and beyond. And now we bid you good night. Let's stick together, let's appreciate each other, and let's join up again for another great evening of music and conversation on Red Barn Radio. I'm Bradford Becker. See you soon.